Hi everyone, this is Geon Paper, and in this video I would like to do a couple of ink swatches and comparisons for one specific ink. In this case, the ink is Shanghai Stationary Mudan, which is named after peonies. And this sample was provided to me by Shanghai Stationary at the Dutch Pen Show this year. I've yet to swatch it, so that's what I want to do. And let's start with my A5 swatch on Tomoe River paper. I do these for all of the inks, ink bottles, ink samples, everything that comes in, and I keep them in a binder because I just think this gives such a good overview of what the ink looks like on Tomoe River paper. So I'm just gonna give this a little bit of agitation, even though it's just a regular ink. No sheen or shimmer. Now I'm going to put a few drops with my pipette. It looks like it's going to be a sort of a wine red color. That's beautiful. And while this dries, I'm just going to put it to the side. This ink already looks really pretty. And then I'm going to make one of these smaller Wearingle swatch cards. And I always like to make an extra fine and medium line on the top part of the card, just to get an overview of how it mostly helps seeing how wet the ink is, because if it's a really wet ink, you often get kind of thicker lines. This seems to be a fairly wet ink, or at least the flow is really good. I always think it's a pretty good sign if I don't run out of ink by just writing the name of the brand and the ink, because with very dry inks you tend to see that you will often run out of ink with a dip pen after like just one and a half words. And then a medium line. I really like this color. And then this one, let's just do it like this. Then I use the back of the dip pen to color in the ink bottle. And then the third type of swatch that I like to make is on this A7 watercolor paper. I buy this paper just in big packs of A4 and I cut them down to A7 to make these swatch cards. I just think these are the most practical to shuffle around, compare, sort in various ways, even though they don't always give the most accurate representation of the ink color, which is why I especially also like to swatch on Tomoe River paper, but these are just easier to handle than those A5 sheets of Tomoe River. And I always write the name of the brand and ink in with a Pigma marker and not with the ink itself, because as you may or may not see on camera, this paper is very textured and it's really hard to write on it with a dip pen or like a fountain pen nib. It's just much easier with a very blunt marker. So then I'm just going to stick that down with a little bit of washi. And I like to use washi that doesn't stick that well anymore, because otherwise I'm afraid of ripping the paper. And then I'm just going to use one of these very cheap brushes to apply the ink. And they're also going to let that dry for a little bit. So the ink has not completely dried yet, but I think it's close enough to do a little bit of a color comparison. And there are a few inks that I want to take a look at to see how similar, how different they are. So let's start with, I think it should be in this binder. Okay, Pilot Momiji is definitely pinker, more saturated, more vibrant, and it has that sort of golden greenish sheen, which Mudan does not have. I think I like Mudan much more than Pilot Momiji. Something like Sailor Ink Studio 930 is more red, darker, more of a stronger burgundy color. I had expected Diamine Amaranth to be really close, but it's actually not as close as I had thought. Amaranth has stronger pinkish purple undertones, where Mudan has more red undertones. Ferris Wheel Press Cabernet on the Lake has a somewhat similar undertone, even though it's also a little bit more pink, whereas Mudan's a little bit more red. And Cabernet on the Lake has a gold shimmer. Diamine Cashmere Rose is more of a dusty pink color, a bit lighter, a bit more brown, I think, a bit brown or gray mixed in. Schneider Rose is definitely also more of a purple pink leaning color. Schneider Blush is similar, although it's a little bit lighter and a little bit more, I want to say coral orangey. I mean, it's definitely not a coral orange color, but compared to Mudan, there's some undertones that make it almost appear a little bit more orange. Robert Oster Dusky Pink is also definitely more of a pinkish color. Maybe in the lighter parts it's a bit similar, but yeah, Mudan definitely has very, very red undertone. I wouldn't classify it as a red necessarily. I think Shanghai Stationary does on their website. I think it's somewhere in between a red and a sort of a red, a pink, a burgundy type color. But it has very strong red undertones, absolutely. And you can see those even better when it's wet in the areas where the ink is applied very heavily. So yeah, I don't think I have anything, again, just like with the last Shanghai Stationary ink, that is like a 100% dupe. So I think that's always really cool. There's definitely a new ink color in my collection. I would love to hear if you have anything that you think is very similar to this. I know that that's always a bit hard to gauge through a computer screen or a phone screen. But yeah, let me know if you have anything that you think comes close. And thank you again to Shanghai Stationary for providing the sample. Opinion comparison, that's just my own thoughts. But yeah, I do think this is a really lovely color. I like that it's dark and vibrant enough to be very legible, but not so dark that it kind of appears black when you write with it, or brown. This is definitely a color where you can really see the color even in extra fine or fine writing. So very excited to ink this one up. Thank you for watching and hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.